Everybody, welcome into this month's executive training on Thrive Leadership. 10 non-negotiable equities every leader needs to thrive in their career. My name is Kemy Joseph, and as always, it's an honor to be in front of you today and to be with you today. This topic to me is so important. It also feels like the pinnacle of the work that I've been doing for the last decade or so, because it brings me back to my very first organization I started, my biggest leadership opportunity. So my first organization was called You Are Awesome, literally to remind people that they're awesome. And for me, it's that purpose-driven mission of how do we help people reconnect to that sense of wholeness I was talking about before we started this call. And the first initiative we had, the largest one actually, was a clothing drive to collect 10,000 articles of clothing to give to homeless individuals in Miami-Dade County. Now, what's interesting is that anybody who gave us clothing, at least 5 articles, would then get a You Are Awesome t-shirt and had phrases like you are awesome, love who you are, smile and be happy, things that people wanted to put out positive messages. So I was like, yes, I was living on cloud 9, thinking about putting more positivity into the world. And this initiative called Wildfire, I mean, basically the news was always covering us, and it was like a 2-week sprint. So the news was covering us almost like every other day. So we had people driving from all over the place, miles and hours away, in order to come and be a part of this initiative. And what was interesting is, from the outside looking in, super successful. I remember one night, two of my volunteer coordinators, Gus and Charlie, called me over. They said, "Hey, Kemy, we need to talk." And I don't know, that even when I say that we need to talk, it just doesn't feel good. So they said, "We need to talk." And I already had a laundry list of things I wanted to talk to them about and help them to do better with the volunteers. So I was like, fantastic. And then the place they wanted to talk was a overlook that was on the University of Miami campus. That was a beautiful lake. I love walking out to this space. It feels super zen and motivating for me. But that night, it was not that feeling. As soon as I walked up and I said hello, there was no pleasantries. It was just like, sit down. Okay, so already I'm on edge and I'm sitting down listening to their feedback. And it wasn't feedback about volunteers. They said, "Kemy, there's a big problem with the Great Giveaway," which is the name of the initiative. There's a big problem with this initiative, and it's you. I started to list out all the things that I was doing wrong, including how often I would show up to a group of volunteers who'd been working all day, working a couple hours, whatever it was, and instead of any praise or any support or any guidance and saying thank you, I was coming at them with criticism, including constantly they kept referring to how often I was nagging people about folding their clothes, folding the clothes properly. And the tension starts to rise because I'm getting defensive. We're going back and forth. And they said something that just kind of blew the lid. They said something to the effect that the last bit of it said, "We're not even getting paid." And I just flew up. I wish I was paying you, because if I was paying you, you would just do what I said. And they fired back. "So you think if you were paying us, you could control us?" And I just said, "Yes. Yeah." That was the first time I remember speaking out loud those words. If I'm just paying you, I just want you to comply. I just want you to do what I said. And as soon as I said those words out loud, all the flashbacks of bosses that I had that I thought were terrible, but they had that kind of mentality. So I just took it on as the default way to lead, the controlling leadership. I remember Gus saying to me, "Kemy, you could pay us to sit down, shut up, and comply. You can't pay us to trust you. We already trust you, and you're losing that trust unless you do something different." I don't know how many of you can relate to those moments where you have the controlling leadership moments. Unfortunately, a lot of us have controlling leadership moments that become controlling leadership style, that become a controlling leadership lifestyle. I appreciate Gus and Charlie putting an end to it at that point, or at least inviting me to take a better journey. I wish I said that was the end of it. That would be fantastic. But it's been a journey over the last decade or so to continue peeling back those layers and to really show up as a thriving leader. So today I want to be able to share with you what's been the impetus behind this work for that long. And even though F.E.A.R.S has only been around for 2 years, I knew back then that the thing that was motivating me to show up in this toxic way was my fears. It was interesting for me, the biggest fear was failure. I'm the one who set up the initiative. I'm the one who set the goals, set the timelines. I was working all these hours. All I thought about is if this thing fails, that means I'm a failure. I wonder how many of you can relate to that sense of the fear of failure that causes us to try to protect ourselves in ways that actually become more toxic and actually lead to failure versus leading to the success. And that success, that's true success, because the success that I was feeling along the way was I would finally get to all these goals and benchmarks, but I felt unfulfilled. And that sucks even more, to reach a success, to reach a major milestone and still feel like, damn, why did I even do all this effort? So I want to be able to thrive in a way that I can have the success and get to that success, get to those milestones in a way that feels like I'm still flourishing and I'm ecstatic about it. So if that's the kind of journey that you want to go on as a leader, put yay in the chat. Or you can put thrive. We'll give you options. You can put yay or thrive in the chat. And that brings us into this conversation. For us, instead of allowing our fears to maintain control, we want to help use our fears to fuel equitable actions, relationships, and systems. Now, this is why we're on a mission to help 5 million leaders advance equity in their organizations by 2030. We know that when more leaders are thriving, when more leaders have a sense of wholeness, then we can have workplaces where every team member at every level can work safely and thrive. We're going to say thrive quite a bit, so let me give you the definition right now. There's a bunch of definitions. If you look in the dictionary, I agree with all of them. To prosper, be fortunate or successful, to grow or develop vigorously, to flourish. Either one, I'll take it. Ideally, if we have a combo pack where you get them all, fantastic. But the idea of how do we thrive in a way that allows us to flourish as leaders and then helps to pass that on to our teams. So as we get into the objectives for today, I really want to cover, so you can learn the one thing leaders are missing that prevents them from thriving. You can evaluate yourself in the 10 non-negotiable aspects of career equity and learn how to develop them yourself. And you can learn how leaders are going from, I'm done with this, right? I don't know how many of y'all have thrown up your hands like, I'm so over this, or I can't even, I'm done with this, to work is fun again. And this is why I'm saying, for me, like, wholeness is ecstatic, because that sense of that work can be fun again. Because if work is not fun or meaningful or purposeful, what the heck are we even doing right now? By applying an essential 5-part framework that gives them more time, contributes to record revenues, and restores meaningful relationships in the workplace. Now, you already know this 5-part framework. We're just going to bring it more into your awareness. It is the F.E.A.R.S Advantage framework to fuel equitable actions, relationships, and systems. Now, for the bigger presentation, we're going to focus on fuel, equitable, and actions, and then we're going to tie it all together as we wrap up at the end. And so I'll spend about 10 minutes talking about fuel right now to cover this first objective: learn the one thing leaders are missing that prevents them from thriving. Now, I love Albert Einstein, even as I mess up his name there. I love Albert Einstein. It says, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. The wild thing is we're creating problems all the time, but we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to think differently in order to solve those problems, especially in the sense of helping our team think differently to be able to solve problems that we all created together. Now, we are very much on this journey of becoming like the Brené Brown of DEI and equity, where we're constantly researching and striving to find the trends and to report back on the research. So these monthly trainings are a great opportunity for us to report back on what's really happening out here and ways to break through the mold. If you tracked with us last month, you would have learned about our stages of DEI maturity. And this was all based on last year's hardships and challenges and successes to say, but we found out that companies are in 5 stages of DEI maturity: initiating, aligning, progressing, building, and scaling. So in the initiating phase, you want to grow DEI in your organization, but don't know where to start. Aligning, starting to increase awareness, buy-in, and training around DEI issues in your organization, but you're still dealing with the uphill hurdle of getting everyone on the same page. Progressing, starting to adopt practices that strengthen levels of trust, safety, and belonging needed for an inclusive culture. Building, starting to establish equitable processes, policies, and goals across your organization. And this is when you start to kind of take it out of HR, what people traditionally believe is supposed to be like delegating DEI, is when you start to actually embrace DEI as a whole thing in your organization. And finally, the scaling, systematically integrating DEI into your revenue generating and distribution efforts. So how you make your money and how you pay your folks. Now, you can learn more about this in the training from last month, and we can even send it to you as we send you this replay. So I'm not going to go too much into it. The interesting thing is what we wanted to share with folks is that there is a progression of DEI initiatives, or an ideal progression, right? The idea that you would go from initiating and go into scaling. Now, we call it an ideal progression because we try to communicate that this is still a non-linear process. It can go back and forth just like stairs. Stairs go both up and down, right? So you can see this sense of being able to know that you can go backwards sometimes, and you can go forward, and you can be going from initiating to scaling and back and forth, up and down, right? So just know that we're still saying DEI or embedding it is still a wild journey, and say thank you all for going on different versions of that journey to start progressing towards a scaling phase within your organization. Now, when we talk about this progress, we also want to look at who are the people, or where are certain decisions being made to really allow this journey to continue. So an initiating phase, it's important. This is where leaders may initiate it based on, for example, a lot of folks initiated DEI things after the murder of George Floyd. So leaders kind of came to the enlightenment moment and decided to initiate processes in their organization. And then when we start to get to aligning, it requires the team. And then when you have leaders in the team together, then we start to go, as we go to progressing, we're starting to build a culture where this can actually be embedded. And then ideally, it becomes organizational, it becomes operationalized in our organization. That's really what happens with the scaling. Now, I would love to tell you that this is what happened, and that many people went from a leader saying, hey, let's do this, to the organization adopting it. This is what a version of what that could look like, thinking through this thing that if we were going towards building DEI and we're looking at what's on the other side of DEI, we would say what's on the other side is thriving. So we would have to be looking at a journey that gets people all from initiating, because we all have to start an initiating process, and gets folks towards thriving. Now, this is one version of what it could look like. If you had a leader who says, great, we're going to take the whole team towards thriving, it's still going to be a wavy type of journey, but what if we can get it to where folks felt like we actually were reaching these milestones, we were scaling. You can actually ask your team, where are we? And there's 100% of people say, yeah, we're in scaling. We're still doing the hard work. It's not over, but we're all 100% alignment. We have not found those teams yet. We have found many, many teams where this is happening. The leader is still initiating. The leader is still stuck where they may not understand the business case. They may not be affected by it. Whatever the reasons, they're still stuck in aligning, and they're ping-ponging back and forth, which is why we say it's a non-linear journey. They're ping-ponging back and forth, and there's people on their team who says, hey, I would love to go further. We can take this further, but they're not even getting the permission, or they're getting this kind of soft level of like, yeah, go do it. But then when they actually start to do the work, it's like, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean we need to do this? We need to do that. I didn't approve that. So I'll tell you right now, the most important thing that leaders need to understand is that controlling leadership is the bottleneck to progress and thriving in your organization. There's literally no way your team's going to go forward without your consent, without your support, without your allyship to actually make this journey, which is why we started focusing solely on leaders to help make this shift. And some of y'all may have heard me share a story of this, where last year we were hired to do some work at the scaling level, right? Doing some DEI strategic planning. And the person we were working with was amazing. I don't want to say her name. Let's call her Elsie. That's the name of my mom. So that way I can use that. Let's call her Elsie. So Elsie was phenomenal, really cared about the work. Elsie was in this place of really progressing and wanting to move the organization forward. Elsie was also given the permission from the executives to hire us and to do the things they're saying. Literally said to her, all right, you make the decision, we'll trust your decision. Awesome. What an empowering type of leadership. What a way to show up. We do an assessment, which is part of our journey to assess instead of make a mess. We do an assessment, and then if you're picking up services in the scaling bucket, we measure every aspect of your organization, right? So it's like a 95-point assessment to make sure if you're talking about scaling this, let's actually get a little bit deeper into what's happening. So then the leader saw the results of that, and their scores actually weren't that bad for the representative group that we've taken surveys from. So we're like, great, you're doing a lot of things really well, especially for the stage that they're in. But all they could laser in on is all the things they were doing wrong, and they had a big gender gap. And folks were vocal about it after they saw the data. And so all of a sudden, this executive who gave Elsie permission said, whoa, I don't like, what if the data's lying? What if the questions are provoking people? What if we're now fueling the fires of people having dissent and now this movement around gender? It's like, what are you talking about? Assessments only measure what's happening. Their team was 40 people. 40 people shared information that is now collected in data, but this executive shut it down. Was one of the most difficult people I worked with last year. If you're an executive in initiating and you're practicing controlling leadership, not only are you stopping DEI, but you're stopping other progress and stopping your potential for thriving too. Because I know this leader is not thriving. It's not like this person was living it up, because they would act. That's the part that was so heartbreaking, is that they were getting messages from their team that says, hey, you need to hire people who look different than you. We need to diversify the leadership. And they were feeling so attacked. They were not thriving either. And we say, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to shift the way we're thinking about DEI in order to go towards thriving in your organization. But he literally could not hear that anymore. So we'll leave it at that for right now, because we want to help you break through that. But if you're struggling with a DEI initiative that's not going anywhere, just show your leaders this first part. And we're not here to shame or blame the controlling leadership. We're really saying we've all been taught a version of controlling leadership. Most of us have not been taught a different version of what else is better. And some people like push back against servant leadership. They don't want to go from controlling to servant. What if there's something better in the middle that actually allows you to thrive? That's what we're here to offer. That's what I signed up for. And that's what I want to share with you. So thank you for rolling. This closes out the fuel portion to cover that first objective of learn the one thing leaders are missing that prevents them from thriving. Now, as we go into the second piece of this with Equitable, I want to cover the second objective. Now we started putting the objectives in the presentation so you know we're giving you exactly what you came here for. Evaluate yourself in the 10 non-negotiable aspects of career equity and learn how to develop them for yourself. Now, as we talk about empathizing with leaders, we're very clear that leaders cannot give their teams what they don't have. We're not here to just blast leaders, so please get it correct, especially me being an executive. It's important that I understand, I acknowledge that I can't give my team what I don't have. And there's so many leaders, especially like middle manager folks, who, from the employee's perspective, they're being labeled as like the leadership team, but from the executive perspective, they're being labeled as the employee. So they're stuck. They're like, I'm not even getting what you're asking me for. So how do I give my team things like belonging or safety or autonomy when I don't have it myself? So we very much empathize. When we think about the big picture, what we're doing, in a lot of ways, we're thinking about, we're rolling out a leadership and manager retention program. We want to make sure if you train these folks to be credible leaders, are you making sure that they thrive so they stay, they not only raise the level of productivity and excitement in your organization, but they also help you to recruit some more of the awesome quality of folks that you want in those right seats, right? So for all of that's what we're doing for organizations. For you as the person who's listening here, I want to show you how to measure your own thriving in order to find out what you might be missing and how to then build your steps forward. So again, I'll actually spend about 15 minutes in this portion. Now, when we start measuring thriving, I'm going to give you all the definitions here. You're welcome to take a screenshot when they're all here. You don't have to take 10 different screenshots because there are 10 areas. So awareness. I am informed about the various career development / advancement opportunities accessible to me in our organization and what is needed to access them. Access. I have fair entry points to apply for relevant career development / advancement opportunities aligned with my skills and values. Now you're going to notice that we are separating career development and career advancement and you'll see it up at the top later. But something that we found is that there are many people, for example, who became managers because that was the path to advance in the organization, but they never wanted to lead people. They just wanted to do their best and be an expert in their own. They wanted to grow and flourish, but they were told the only way to do that is to become a manager. What a sad realization that you don't want to be a manager or be a leader, and then people are now under your care. So we want to be able to really encourage more organizations to think about separating career development and career advancement so you can become an expert. Like, for example, I've had opportunities to become like an expert facilitator in some organizations, which is awesome because all I get to do is what I love to do myself, as opposed to having to lead a bunch of people. And then when I chose the leadership position of being part of F.E.A.R.S Advantage, then I could be much more in alignment with how I want to show up in the day-to-day. So just giving that little piece of info. Now, opportunity. I've been invited to participate in roles/projects that will lead to career development or advancement after investing my time and effort. Safety. I am free from physical, emotional, intellectual, and psychological harm in my role. Belonging. I feel included because my authentic identities and contributions are acknowledged, considered, and valued, especially in decisions that directly impact me. Now, you will notice that we have separated safety and belonging. So what we have found is that some people are safe because they're hiding who they are. But that's not belonging. Belonging is when we can show up in an ideal version of our professional selves and still be accepted, right? And then like it says here, to be considered, to be acknowledged, to, especially in decisions that directly impact you on a day-to-day basis. Resources. I have the best available tools, information, and support needed to do my job effectively. Development. My role is optimizing my talents with relevant training opportunities to expand my capacity and skill set. Advancement. I have upward mobility on a clear path for role expansion aligned with my career goals. Autonomy. I have the independence to do the work I'm hired to do with the freedom, trust, and ownership in my role. Finally, legacy. I am making a lasting, meaningful difference through my role while receiving the compensation/benefits that enable thriving in other areas of my life. So you're welcome to screenshot these definitions. We will send them to you as well. But a lot of folks this is how we measure thriving in the workplace. This is career equity. Right? You can, as you kind of look in the legacy portion, we do measure thriving in other areas of life, but this is specifically about the career path. And notice, if everybody in your team had this, regardless of their background, their skin color, their gender, if everyone in your team had access to this and had this, we would not be having the DEI conversation in the way that we're having it now. So it's important that we're giving you a clear path to be able to achieve this for yourself as a way to then pass it on to your team and help them experience the equities that they've been asking for. Now, we say all of that because in a traditional org chart, this is how these equities are distributed. So you have the leaders at the top who have access to all 10, from awareness all the way to legacy. Or there's a perception of that, right? There's also the perception that leaders have all that. But then you have middle managers or people in the middle leaders who only get upwards to advancement. And then the folks at the bottom level are considered the entry level or sometimes the peons, and they only get the safety, the bare minimum of what EEO requires. Equal opportunity employment only requires some of the basic things at the bottom. We found out if you give people only the basics, they only give you the basics in return. But we would still say that this is a version of controlling leadership. As people are striving to dismantle this leadership style of oppression or colonialism, this is how it shows up. But we still we think we own our people and we control our people, versus saying, thank you for showing up to work for me, with me, and that I want to help you thrive. This is what it could look like. What if it looked like this? We would call this thrive leadership. Now, if you're sitting here looking at this and having a bunch of fear-based questions, like, wait a minute, does that mean that the entry-level person has the same level of autonomy as the executive? We'd say yes. If not, you're setting up a trap for yourself. where you believe that you actually have to keep them at a certain bay, but then they have to keep coming to you to get answers. And you're like, wait, I don't even have the autonomy. I'll tell you, it's a trap versus actually giving people what they need to do their jobs effectively and trusting them. Now, as we start to measure this, because you know we're all about measuring these things, what if your scores showed up like this? The questions loaded in as you see them here, and you can ponder these questions. What if your data showed up like this, where the green is the favorable scores? Only 40% legacy, 20% autonomy, 40% advancement, 67% development, 40% resources, 60% belonging, 67% safety, 40% opportunity, 80 access, 80 awareness. If these were your scores, would you be thriving? You can answer in the chat for me, please. If these are your scores, you can just say yes or no. Some people might say maybe. We'll deal with that later. As a leader, the part that's really important at the bottom is, as a leader, your team scores will never be higher than yours. So if these were your scores, how could your team scores be any higher? Especially when people fear that, oh, if my team gets more development or advancement than me, they're going to surpass me, or they're going to take my job. So then I start to hold them back. These are all legitimate fears that come up. Again, no shame and blame here. Just we want to be real with what's going on. And so I'll share another story to illustrate this. There's one client that we work with, amazing startup. Like, we're super proud to be working with them. And the CEO at one point mentioned that she, like, when we talk about the diversity conversation, they already have a diverse makeup in their team. And she said, as far as terms of like kind of meeting quotas or metrics, she said, you know what, we want our team to represent the world's population. It's like, fantastic. Like, they already get it. We're rolling. What's interesting is, as a person leading the company, especially in the startup phase, and still going out and getting all these rejections from funding sources and trying to figure out everything that she could do to make sure the team had the financial security, she was feeling so kind of burnt out, and then again, not the sense of autonomy, that she would be coming back to her team and continuing to berate them or tell them that they were not producing enough because she felt like she didn't have enough resources to even pay them. So it's like all this tension, all this fear, again, fear of failure. And what was interesting, when we first started working with her team, we started to address that for her around how she's showing up in that inequity, how she's showing up when she's based on that fear, and really working with their team to think through, what does it mean to have more safety and inclusion? How do they actually have inclusion of voice, which is one of the most important things she keeps reflecting back to us, because she had the diversity, they felt included in most things, but they didn't have an inclusion of voice. Inclusion of voice, especially around problem solving. Sometimes we as leaders, we keep all the problems so close to us and say, man, no one gets it. And we're like, yeah, well, you're not sharing it with anybody who can also help you. And as she did start to share things with them, they could start doing better problem solving. So within 2 months of working with us, they actually had a chance to do a project that they gave so much resistance towards because the team didn't really feel heard. After we started working on the inclusion portion, especially the inclusion of voice portion, they were able to complete one of the projects that gave them the highest grossing quarter in their, the highest grossing month in their 3 to 4 year trajectory. And that was awesome. We can't take credit of the thing of saying, hey, you had a really high grossing revenue, but the thing we can take credit for is the project was only able to happen because when the lead felt overwhelmed, they actually were able to call a meeting and ask for help. And it sounds so simple, but they were afraid to ask for help before, because that would be a sign of weakness. And she, as a leader, is still afraid to ask for help. And sometimes I see the real compassion come out of her when things are going well and they're getting that funding. But then again, the scarcity mindset will grip her again, and I can see the claws come out. I see my own claws come out when I'm in scarcity mindset. So it's important that when we're talking about thriving, it's not just like hey, we solve it one time and it's gone forever. It's like, no, we know that this is a progressive process. And so if we're ever wanting to improve scores like this, it would take an intentional process of building it out for yourself in order to understand what ways that you might even be preventing you from receiving it. And then as we start to truly build this out for you, you experience the differences, it's much easier to then roll it out to your team. Whereas kind of what's happening in the DEI space right now, the traditional space is saying, hey, you have to give this to your team no matter what. And leaders are like, yeah, right. They literally say stuff like, I don't have enough time. We would say, you don't have enough autonomy. If that's your big excuse, that you don't have enough time, that's inequity of autonomy. Let us help you work that through. I want to give a shout out to Nicole, who's on this call, because she's been helping our team get more autonomy. And for me, I realized that, like, even though I changed the controlling leadership, it was showing up for me last year when I felt like I was working 50-hour weeks. And my team said from the very beginning, we don't want that kind of work schedule. I was like, yeah, great. I agree with that. And then when I was on the back end working all those hours, it was really hard for me. Every time they wanted to take a break or to take time off, it was hard for me to really enthusiastically participate in that, or to actually take my own time off when the doors were closed, when our company was closed. And when we measured our own thriving inside our organization, it was like, boom, autonomy. Like, they could see my scores. We were not hiding it. And so then it went from this thing of blaming them, or me blaming the situations we were in, to be like, oh, I'm missing autonomy. Interesting. How do I figure that out? And then I run into Nicole at a conference, and she's telling me about the work she's doing. We'll be working together, so you'll see Nicole pop up at another time. But it's like, oh, there's a way to get to a 30-hour work week that's not this thing of like the mythical 4-hour work week, or these things that seem so kind of nebulous to me. I'm like, I love tactical things. Like, oh, great, show me how to do it. And she's been helping me personally even overcome my own fears as I go through this work, and saying, oh, I think I need to work a certain amount or prove a certain amount of myself in order to actually succeed as a leader. What if I could succeed a different way? That's what we'll offer to you. What if you can succeed a certain way, a different way? If you're willing to even ponder that kind of question, then you're definitely closer to that journey of letting go of trying to control and go towards more of the Thrive leadership. Now, as we said, part of the objective is to help you measure that. So at the end of this presentation, we will give you a link to our free Thrive Leadership Assessment. It's a powerful resource that you'll be able to check in on all 10 of those areas and find out and get your scores right away. We'll talk about that more in a moment. I want you to know that's what we're talking about when we say evaluate yourself in the 10 non-negotiable aspects of career equity, and learn how to develop them yourself. Now, that closes us out on Equitable. The last piece is actions. As we go to actions, the final objective here is learn how leaders are going from I'm done with this to work is fun again, by applying an essential 5-part framework that gives them more time, contributes to record revenues, and restores meaningful relationships in the workplace. The story I shared, even though I didn't name the executive, that was one of the first times we saw you can get the record revenues, have meaningful relationships, and really restore the sense of that freedom that she was looking for when she started her company. Most of us start companies to do things differently, and then we end up repeating the same mistakes. What if we chose to solve our problems differently, and again, set the foundation for thriving from the very beginning, versus trying to undo all the harm that's done in the kind of traditional way of leading? So with that being said, I love this quote from Nelson Mandela that says, it always seems impossible until it's done. Right? Some of you are like, Kemy, this don't make sense. This is impossible. No, it always seems impossible until it's done. So I want to be able to show you the F.E.A.R.S advantage. We're going to basically provide you with some of the coaching questions that we would ask you if you were one of our clients. We know that if you didn't know this already, our coaching program starts at $2,000 a month. And so we know that that's not for everybody. So, but we are very much in this line of thinking of how do we provide you with some of the resources that you can do your own work, including after you take the assessment, having the questions that I'm about to show you on the screen. In order, if you are working with a coach, maybe they can ask you that yourself. But what we found is that you definitely want to have a coach who's doing the work at the executive level as well, running their own company, running their own show, who's also striving to thrive, right, in a way that you can agree with, and who has tools and tactics to help you kind of unpack your own brain, but then operationalize it. So again, we're going to give you the resources, and we're giving you some of the resources, right? Our time is one of the most valuable resources we have. So when you become a coaching client, that's what you're paying for, is our time and expert guidance to take you to that next level. However, we're going to give you some of those resources for free as you're here, and to say thank you for your time today. Now, with that being said, one version of how we see DEI is about diverse solutions, equitable outcomes, and inclusive actions. So this is exactly a scenario for us. Inclusive actions, let's give you some of the tools, that way you can use them yourselves. Now, after you do the assessment, you'll see these gaps. So anytime it refers to a gap, kind of like what you saw in the previous slide, you would see if it has a favorable score of 80%, that means you have a 20% gap. So when I'm referring to the gap in these questions, we're talking about that gap. Now, I'm just going to read the questions, and I'll pause at the end of every slide so you can take a screenshot if you would like. Now, in the fuel area, we'll ask questions like, what does your current score represent to you in your real life, right? So if you had an autonomy score of 80%, what does that actually mean to you? Just kind of walk us through it, talk through it. Let's understand that for you. And then what do you think is causing or fueling that gap, that 20% gap? How long have you been experiencing the gap? Some people say they've been experiencing this for their whole career. So, okay, it's going to take us some while to unpack that, right? In terms of improving your score or your experience, what's in it for you and what's in it for the people you care about? Because we really have to understand what's going to fuel you to do things differently than you have been doing before, knowing that sometimes we're the ones who keep ourselves trapped. How would closing this gap bring more joy to your work? Again, we're all about people enjoying what they do. So if we did close this gap, when we close this gap, how would that bring more joy to you? So this is the last question. Go ahead and take a screenshot. And then we'll roll into the next one now. Now, in the equitable portion, some of the coaching questions may be, how are you currently responding to this gap? Because we're always interested in how people respond to unfairness in their lives. A lot of times we will respond in a way that increases more unfairness or increases more inequity. So then the follow-up question, is your current response increasing or decreasing fairness for you and those around you? And then how can you identify and reduce any harm you may be causing as you transition towards thriving? That's real. When we're not thriving, we are not the best versions of ourselves. So we want to be able to identify ways that we might be causing additional harm and reduce that along your journey towards thriving. So those are the questions right there. Go ahead and take a screenshot. We're going to roll to actions now. So with actions, we'll ask you questions like, what actions would help you improve your score by 10% in the next month? So if you're going from 80 to 90 in a month, let's see what actually you think that would take, and let's build a plan to get you there. And then as we find out, sometimes a plan may not be able to get it done in a month, but then great, we're already rolling in month 2, then you can get what you want. Fantastic. Let's go on to the next piece and continue to close the gaps that you're looking for. And then it starts to have exponential types of benefits and exponential types of progress. So then what has prevented you from taking action up to this point right now? Is there anything you can foresee that would prevent you from taking action now? And I love that question, because then people start to tell us the things that are getting in their way in a different light. And one of the core pieces of our program is 100% responsibility. So you'll never catch me complaining about things. You won't catch me kind of making excuses. Like, I'll apologize for things that I messed up on, but ideally I try not to make any excuses. I'm like, great, let me own it and move forward, because it's 100% responsibility. And if I can actually answer this question, I know that I'm preventing myself oftentimes from actually doing what is needed to do. And I can give lots of excuses, I can give lots of reasons, but only I can determine when I'm ready to make that change. And what is one way you will measure the progress and benefits of your actions? Like when we do coaching sessions, part of the flow is to look at micro progressions. What micro progressions you want to celebrate that week, and this is part of how we measure it. But if you are not working with us, figure out what is one way that you can measure the progress and benefits of the actions that you're taking. All right, I got 2 more sections here. We're gonna go through the questions for relationships. So how is this gap impacting the relationships within your team? Are there any other relationships in your life being negatively impacted by this gap? Who haven't you spoken to about this that really needs to know about your current experience? Man, it's wild how many people are back to the kind of complaining or telling other people who have no ability to change it but then they don't tell the person who has the greatest ability to change it or to even support them. So then the next question is, how do you actually want someone to support you right now? How do you actually want people to support you? And follow up, have you communicated that to someone you trust? Like, have you actually said these things out loud to somebody else? Again, some of you are like, oh, these are simple, or like we're kind of joking around here, but it's like, this is very real. Some folks don't ask for help. And sometimes the coaching is the first time they feel safe asking for help. So we want to acknowledge, but the reason we ask the question is like, what's preventing them from asking someone that they trust? And then we start thinking about, people start again bringing up all the fears of not feeling worthy or not feeling whole, feeling like they're going to fail, feeling like they're going to be judged. Like right now when the fears are in the room, we can deal with them. I'm not a mind reader. I listen and I practice a lot of intentionality. I can only deal with what's in the room based on what people share. And so with the same with our coaches. So this is the relationship portion. Feel free to grab a screenshot. It's funny, I'm trying to de-violence my language, so I'm going to stop saying screenshot. Feel free to take a picture of a screen, because somebody, when they came to do a documentary of me, like, oh, we're going to go shoot Kemy in the office. I was like, no, no one's shooting Kemy anywhere. But the admin is that we're going to come and take footage of Kemy in the office doing his thing. So it's like, how much violence do I have in my language? So you're going to hear me shift from doing screenshot to say do a screen grab, just so you know that I'm always on this journey of even taking out some language that that most people may not even think about, but for me, it's still communicating so much more violence than it really needs to. So you're welcome to take a picture of the screen as we continue on, or take a screen grab, whatever you want. All right. So now we're going to the next one here, systems. What is one boundary you need to put in place immediately to progressively increase your score and sustain your thriving in the long term? Now, some people don't see boundaries as a system, but then we override our boundaries all the time. I definitely want to consider a boundary, because we kind of constantly got to uphold it as like a personal system and make sure that you can be protected on your own journey. And then, what is one habit you need to commit to practicing right now that will help you integrate thriving leadership into your daily life? Habits are not, these are systems that we're trying to say, hey, you have these systems even before you change systems in your organization. What about your boundaries and habits? And what is one process you can build / strengthen this month to help you systematically thrive in this area? When we talk about autonomy, I mentioned Nicole, always give Nicole lots of shout outs. She's helping us systematize some of our operations, so then I can have more autonomy, our whole team can have more autonomy. But it requires you to look at the processes that may be holding you back. And then finally here, can you think of a workplace policy and or procedure that needs to change to enable thriving in this area? So if you have sometimes we get stuck on the workplace policies. For example, some people's workplace policy, if we're looking at autonomy, doesn't allow you to take certain time off. And you're just like, okay, the one thing that's interesting, I told you before, like we very much are thinking about this as a executive and manager retention program when we're being paid by a company to bring us in. And either way, we want to make sure that anybody who's in our care, if we let's talk about the things that might be blocking. There might be systematic policies or things that are in there that just no one's talking about, because they're not even thinking that that's blocking autonomy or blocking belonging or advancement or development. And we can have conversations and help you have those conversations, because that's what we also do for our living, right? So we're just helping you have the tools to advocate on your behalf and increase your agency within your own organization. So those are the questions for systems. Ignore the typos and just grab the picture. We'll clean that up for the next one around. And then, all right, finally, that closes us out for systems portion. And that kind of covers this objective here that I mentioned, that we really want to make sure we can give you that 5-part process. And when we coach with you, we take you through that to go from I'm done with this, or I'm over this, or I'm frustrated by this, in order to come to a place where you actually feel like you can have a leadership that contributes to record revenues, restores meaningful relationships in the workplace, and gives you more of that time, that freedom, that joy that we kind of are striving for in this Thrive journey. Now that closes us out with the main piece of content for the Fuel, Equitable, and Actions. As I mentioned to you, we want to give you the free leadership assessment. And so I just want to roadmap what will happen for the rest of the time for those of you who decide to stay with us. I will intentionally pause and say I see messages in there requesting the screenshots. We can do that towards the end of the presentation, or again, we'll send you that along the way. We'll send you that as a follow-up email. So thank you for asking. I just want to make sure I can acknowledge it, and we will. I'm not going to go back to it right now. So for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to show you, give you access to the free Thrive Leadership Assessment, and actually give you time to do it. This thing is scheduled for 90 minutes, so we made sure to intentionally finish this portion with 10 minutes to go, so give you time to do it. So even if you just take the questions we gave you and you take the assessment, you have a bunch of resources to now go and then start to increase your thriving. So after that 10 minutes, so pretty much exactly at 3, we'll start giving people opportunities for spot coaching, which is a version of a hot seat, but I don't like the version of hot seat. I feel like hot seats just mean it has to be intense and you have to talk about things that are crazy. Spot coaching, whatever you want to talk about in regards to those 10 Thrive areas. So after you get your assessment, so say you have a score of 70 in legacy, and that's really important to you, you want to increase that score, you get a chance to be coached by me for roughly 10 to 15 minutes. And we'll take about 1 or 2 people to then give you, all of you, a chance to see what our coaching can look like. I will tell you that I'm not taking on any new clients. So this is a chance to actually get some coaching from me, even if it's 15 minutes. And then for those of you who want to sign up with us, we have some amazing coaches here. I know I see LaShondra and Dakota on here as well. Folks who are going to take care of you. Brian has like 1 more slot open himself. So we got some awesome folks who will take care of you, but I want to be able to make sure we can give you an experience of that for those of you who are interested. So the link to the free Thrive Leadership Assessment is here. I know that we'll put it in the chat for you as well. And then Brian, did you want to explain to them at all how to get there? 'Cause I know you were wanting to make sure that folks exactly know how to find it on the page.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you get to the, when you click the link, just scroll down a little bit. The first orange button is the link to the actual coaching program application. The second section looks like what you see here on your screen, and there's an orange button that says take the free assessment. It's just below the first orange button. So scroll down just a little bit on the page, click that orange button for the free assessment, and then you'll be guided through the process.
And it only takes a few minutes. So what we'll do is, thank you so much, Brian. What we'll do is we'll close out the formal part of the presentation so we can send the recording. And then, like I said, we will stay on for those of you who are finished the assessment and want to get some spot coaching. As we close out, I'll share that I live here in Miami, and right now, it's like, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, it's very nice weather outside. And so I was opening up my windows and just to have some cross breeze, but I was realizing how stuffy it was. And it's just like, what's happening? I open all the windows, but it's so stuffy. The problem is that I can only open my windows about this high because I put these little white locks that make sure that no one can open the window from the outside. So no one can open the windows to help me feel safer in my own neighborhood. I've been living here for about 1.5 years, and no one has tried to open my windows, but these little locks are now preventing me from getting the breeze, the flow, the kind of breath of fresh air that I'm looking for. And just keep thinking about how many times we as leaders have put things in place that at one time we felt like were going to be helpful to protect us, but now are preventing us from having the breath, from having the flow that we need in our lives. And sometimes it's very small, it's a little white piece of plastic. And we have put it there, we created the problem, we can think differently to solve the problem in a new way. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of your journey, helping you problem solve in a new way. And look forward to you working with us and working with our team to help you on your journey of thriving.